Right then. Hello and welcome to the Marketing PodCast, where today's session is on brand voice. Why is B2B still clearing its throat? So, Rosie, season 2.
They've let us back in.
Which feels brave and bold. And we're starting with something that might make a few marketing teams feel a little bit uncomfortable, brand voice. Specifically, why so much of B2B still sounds like it's about to present like a quarterly update, quite mundane.
Very serious, very careful, very beige.
Mm-hmm. And today we've got the lovely Emma and James from our wonderful content team with us.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so are we going to keep this honest?
Gently honest. So let's ease in. So we've all seen B2B brands that sound like they've been through around 3 rounds of legal before they actually get any of their copy out. What's the one safe corporate word that gives you the ick that you would happily ban forever?
I mean,
only one.
I feel like you've got so many.
Oof, yeah, the list keeps growing, unfortunately. I think probably my least favourite word is leverage. It's everywhere, isn't it? And it's a bit of a shame for leverage because it's actually quite a good word. I think the first time it was used, probably it had lots of meaning. And obviously, if you've got a lever, you can, move stuff and
If you've got a lever, you need to use the word leverage. Yeah.
Exactly. But most people are using it, probably they could just be using use. Yeah. And I think it's overuse, isn't it? And that's what happens, really. Brands think they're sounding professional and sophisticated, but actually human brain is hardwired to kind of shut down if something's too familiar, too predictable. So yeah, they're not reaching the people they want to reach anymore.
Yeah. And there's been like research.
Yeah.
There's been research that shows the more simply and clearly you can explain something, the better it's understood that you understand it as well. So actually using all your leverages, isn't that helpful? I think mine would probably be, it's on a similar vein really, like utilize, like just say use. Yeah. Like it just always seems like a long form way of saying it. It's not needed.
Yeah, and innovate, if you are genuinely innovating, then tell me what you're doing, how you're doing it, why it matters to me, but just to say we're really innovative, you're probably not, let's be honest.
Do you know what, the ones that I don't like, optimize, I see that so often, and solutions, everything's solutions.
Yeah, and the English language is really limited and sometimes you can't avoid using it. So if you're going to put it in there, I would say then definitely do explain why you're using it,
Agree. Yeah.
Fab. So James, let's talk about AI. Loads of brands are using it for content now, and you've got to admit it's fast and efficient. I'm guilty. I am quite a big fan. But you've previously said it's basically the average sum of its parts. What do you mean by that?
So if you think about AI is taking kind of everything, all the knowledge and information it has access to and kind of creating the average of all that information, really. So it's a great tool in a sense for like summarizing or generating some content, but it's always going to be the average of everything that's available online that it's learning from. So you're never going to really stand out. And I think when you're thinking about brand voice, I mean, we would say this, wouldn't we? But brand voice is so essential. Like it touches everything that your business or company does. And when you look at that against kind of the landscape of AI that we find ourselves in now, the sea of sameness, like it's kind of, if you want to really differentiate yourself in the market, I feel like the brands that are going to fall behind are the ones that kind of stay in that safe space and don't try and differentiate and stand out through their brand voice.
Yeah, the one thing that AI can never have is an opinion. So, if you're just using AI to generate all of your content, then it is going to end up being a little bit bland, a little bit meh. You need to make sure that you're using an original voice, like James says, otherwise you're just going to blend in.
Yeah.
So is AI brilliant as a starting point, but not as a finish line?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the world we're increasingly finding ourselves in, like it can be useful for, there's nothing more scary sometimes than the blank page, and for kind of helping you along with some ideas or something to kind of bounce ideas off, then I think it can be a useful starting point. But again, particularly when you're talking about something what you really want to hone and define, like brand voice, you really can't be reliant on it. I don't think it needs to have that kind of human impact, and to be able to make sure that what you're saying is really authentic and it's got that kind of human connection to, like, only a human's going to be able to add that in, which is why it's so important.
So do you think now a human-led voice is more important than ever before?
Definitely that, yeah.
Yeah.
And to keep pointing back to the people that, you know, you're experts within the business as well. So ideally, every blog you write, every piece of content you put out, it should be attributed back to a person. If you can get their name and their job title and their LinkedIn, you know, profile on there, then, you know, the AI that people are using to search the internet is actually going to give it higher credentials, and you're going to get that cut through that you're after.
And also, like, AI has been something of like creating like a level playing field now. Like, everyone can access it. Everyone can create that same content that, you know, just by putting it into a tool. So actually, how are you standing out? What thinking are you doing behind that to kind of refine and make your voice a bit more distinctive? I think that's where there's real kind of opportunities, particularly in the B2B space at the moment.
Oh, that leads beautifully into my next question. Emma, just talking about brand voice, I think organisations often treat brand voice like it's more of a B2C thing, as if B2B already has to always be taken seriously. So is there actually less room to be adventurous in B2B?
No. Is the short answer. No, I think, traditionally it's always been seen as something that's more valuable to B2C, and they're the people who've invested in it. And I think B2B is honestly really catching up. I think we've certainly got clients who know how important it is and want to invest in it and want to spend the time getting it right, and are going to really see kind of the benefit of doing that as well. I think there's two things to remember, isn't there? Yeah, if you're B2B, then you're probably selling to more than one individual. It might be a committee, numerous stakeholders, to use another buzzword. But I think what you've got to remember is every single one of those stakeholders is actually a human being. So yes, they will have to consider, sustainability, regulatory, whatever kind of what their procurement team wants them to do. But there will always also be an emotional element to why they choose your B2B brand. And whether that's, I recognise you, I think your values probably align to ours, all of those kind of little emotional bits that the lizard brain is strong within us all kind of thing. And the other thing that's really important to remember is actually that the B2B buyers themselves are changing. So we're seeing that, and we'll see it more and more, the people entering the workforce, the people within the workforce are digital natives, and they've got different expectations. They expect a less formal approach. They expect probably to have more personalisation. They want to be an individual at the centre of your messaging. So I think, B2B brands kind of ignore that at their peril. But there's definitely room for them to be exciting. I think some are already, getting it right. Probably harder for the big corporate heritage brands to kind of convince lots of people and get through those sign-off processes, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when brands think about like creating a new tone of voice for a B2B brand, particularly a more established one, that can be quite a scary prospect. Like, they think, well, we're not going to extend as far as like an innocent voice or whatever, and that. That's right, and it's not appropriate for your customer base, but there's lots of different directions and nuances that you can push a tone of voice in to make it a bit more kind of resonant with the kind of audience you want to be talking to. There's a lot of things you can do that, and it doesn't have to be overblown or over the top, that you can be nuanced with it as well. But because you're doing it repeatedly on every kind of brand asset and everything that you own, I think over time and with all the other aspects that make up your brand, it's really quite powerful.
Yeah, I think arguably the stakes are even higher in B2B, but that just makes the brand voice more important than ever.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
So James,
Hello.
Just on that kind of same note, if someone's watching this or listening to this and thinks, right, I need to sort my brand voice out, I know you've got a snazzy little deck of cards up your sleeve.
We love those cards.
But where should they actually begin?
I was going to say, funny enough, we've got a workshop for that. No, I think, it was worth mentioning we've kind of devised a new workshop around developing tone of voice, using the voice box toolkit as well as a structure, which has been really helpful. So much fun. And I think it's got to start with the people, really. It's about, first of all, getting the right people in the room and making sure you've got representatives from across your team. Not too many, because sometimes it can be a bit too many cooks in the kitchen, but you want someone from leadership, someone from the marketing team, someone that's customer facing, and getting them together. And then, essentially we've split our workshop into kind of 3 distinct phases. So first of all, you kind of want to take an honest look at where you currently are, like take something that's like your core proposition or mission statement, or maybe some like real high level piece of content that you would see on the website. And let's start there and critique it. And there'll be things that you're doing good, that you're doing well. But I'm sure once you're kind of in that space and you're kind of looking at it closely, you'll identify lots of areas for improvement. There might be parts that read a bit flat, parts which could be doing more heavy lifting, which you could inject a bit more energy or personalization into it too. Is it telling the kind of story that you want to tell to your customers? So first of all, we do a bit of a deep dive into that. The second stage is looking at, we've kind of defined like 11 primary voices that you could lean into when you're looking at developing your tone of voice more. So we'd read examples for each of those primary voices and kind of see which ones you're drawn to, which one you think are going to work with your audience, which one reflects your brand best. And then the final area is kind of looking, I won't completely reveal the exercise, but it is a really...
the secret sauce.
I won't give away the secret sauce, but it is a really fun exercise. And it's more about looking at the kind of traits and values that underpin your voice. Because again, like I said before, I think developing a new brand voice can seem quite daunting. And also people, I think, assume that there's only so many routes you can take it, but actually there's lots of different kind of qualities and traits that you can underpin, and it's those combination of traits that can kind of really make your brand voice unique, unmistakably yours. But it's how they combine. Like we'll look at if we kind of collect all these different traits that you think stand for your brand voice, but then how can we group them in different ways? How can they be thought of in different ways? Why can we kind of dig a bit deeper into why some of those have been chosen? And that process is really quite revealing as well.
And how you ration, because we actually did this exercise at Pod and it was so much fun. And we started with the whole, this is where we are today, this is how we talk about ourselves, like looking just something like just a homepage copy. Then we went into the exercise of, okay, where do we think our strengths are? Where do we think we should be? What are the kind of keywords that resonate with us? Then we had the big table discussion between us all as to why we'd pick certain things. And then we rationalised it. And then we went back. Well, then we looked at our values, which was comical because I think we had 7 at the time, couldn't actually recall them. And now we've rationalised it into something that's much more meaningful. But then we looked back at the homepage at the very end and it was like, wow, we're so far away where we want to be. And you don't realise that at the beginning of the process. It was such a good fun exercise to do.
And I think it's really worth mentioning as well that like a brand voice will evolve over time. It doesn't stay still, and kind of where the brand you were 5 years ago probably isn't where it shouldn't really be where you are now. And it's perfectly natural for that voice to change too. But it's a really revealing exercise to do because I think it reveals a lot around your values and the kind of story you want to tell, how that's reflected both externally and internally as well. So I think a lot of businesses would find it quite illuminating as part of an overarching, more strategic marketing
and to refresh it too, because you're right. From a pod perspective, it's a journey that we've been on, and as we've obviously gotten more mature, we've gotten more confident and a bit more kind of willing to back ourselves in some of the statements that we make, and that obviously isn't reflective of the content we had at that point in time, which was right for then, but isn't right for now.
But isn't right for now, yeah. And it's just about being honest and looking at what direction you need to go in next, and then having the rationale and the inspiration and the enthusiasm and all the insight and inputs to make it happen.
Fab.
We probably should credit the creator of VoiceBox.
Yeah, Nick Parker.
A very clever man. That
accomplished copywriter, yeah.
I'm picturing the guy that made Wallace and Gromit. That's somebody completely different. The wrong person.
Different person, but yeah.
Much better with words rather than wax.
It's a really clever tool, and it's a really good conversation starter, and obviously people will use it in a multitude of ways, but it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Obviously brilliantly executed as well.
Yeah, of course.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating how all of that brand work comes together, and whether or not companies are using like VoiceBox or different tools to work through what their brand voice is for them. There's a lot of like time and investment and effort that lots of companies put in to make this happen for them. And there's some amazing brand voices out there. But then after all that work's done, after all that investment is complete, how do we make sure, or how do companies make sure that it actually then is used across the business, not just by the marketing team, but is properly reflected in everything they do, rather than just being tucked away in some dusty folder and forgotten all about?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think all too often we do see that, you know, people have really invested you know, and interested in doing the brand work, but it is usually just that group of people. And then it's kind of, well, what do we do with it next? I think we would always recommend that any kind of tone of voice branding exercise is followed up with employee engagement, and just to make sure that everybody really understands what you've done, why you've done it, you know, why it's important. And also, you know, have some really practical examples and tools to help them use it in their everyday life. If you don't, unfortunately, you know, it's just not going to get carried through. The brands that do it best, you see it everywhere, don't you? You see it on their privacy policy, you see it on their 404 messages, you see it throughout. And when you pick up the phone to speak to them, you also hear it through their kind of teams as well. So yeah, I think that it definitely makes sure you embed it, and the more interesting and engaging that you can make that, the better. And again, we've seen a brilliant example of this with one of our own clients, Empower Business Solutions, and they came up with the brilliant idea of doing a very immersive virtual reality experience for all of their customer facing teams that we were lucky enough to support them on. But absolutely fascinating, using audio and video and getting customers to use their own words to kind of explain. I mean, you were more involved with that, I think, than I, James.
It was an amazing project to be part of, and NBS did such an incredible job of like really embedding it. And I think it comes down to taking your whole organization on that journey with you, you know, for them to feel inspired and enthused and just as excited about it as the people making those decisions about what direction you want to take your brand in. You've got to give them the why, you've got to give them the reasoning behind it, and, you know, apply a bit of logic and common sense as well. I think that, you know, leave the branding work is obviously going to be done by your comms professionals and your marketing professionals, but if the wider team can understand the values that underpin where, for example, your tone of voice is being taken, you know, you're not going to expect them to, you know, your sales team to draft a perfectly curated email each time that's speaking in the exact right tone. But if you can give them the understanding behind the thinking and really define and pinpoint what has driven that new tone, then I think you will see they will start to adopt it. And like Emma says, it's about kind of making sure it's really embedded across every touch point in your business. That's when it becomes
getting
kind of
people
organic
excited
and natural
about it. Yeah.
They did for that project, they did like a bit of a kind of a litmus test to kind of say, how connected do you feel to the brand? And then they did it after they'd actually been through that immersive experience, and the results were just phenomenal. They had absolutely skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of because they've been immersed in everything and understood their role within it as well.
And then like the wider implications of that. So then you've got a more engaged team that are more passionate brand advocates. You know, can you roll it out to across your brand recruitment processes? You know, like, you know, you see so many recruitment ads that say we're hiring, you know, and that again, it's all about the brand. It's not about the person, and it's not pitched in an original tone that really tells you who that brand is.
Yep.
It's just there's so much you can do with it.
I think again, more B2B businesses are realizing that now, that they need employer branding as well as kind of making sure that their customers understand who they are. They need to be attracting, you know, the talent of the future. So they're making sure it carries across.
Yep. Fab. Okay, James, I'm coming back to you. Kind of building, we talked about the wonder if I call them tarot cards, because that's how it felt when we did the workshop. But if people haven't got access to those tarot cards, what one simple exercise could a brand do this week just to check whether their voice is actually distinctive?
I think a really simple thing to do is take that kind of central piece of content, whether it might be your homepage copy or your value proposition, you know, look at it without branding attached to it. Look at it without your company logo. Look at it side by side with some of your competitors' branding as well, and see if you can kind of tell the difference, really. Does it sound generic? Are you kind of really pointing out your differentiators? Is the tone distinctive? Does it capture your brand's essence and what you stand for, your purpose? And there's so much you can do with tone as well. Like it's how you speak, but it can lead into like the texture of how you're speaking as well, and how you structure content. There's so much you can do with it. But if you look at it and think that kind of sounds like everyone else in my market, then there's probably room for improvement. I think like, you know, if you were at a cocktail party and you were kind of making conversations, let's make it fun. We've got champagne.
Look at our tone of voice.
Yeah. Would you go and talk to the person that's kind of the everyday person that just kind of
Talking about leveraging synergies.
Synergies. It sounds quite
Actually threw up a little bit in my mouth and
you know, that hasn't really got much to say. Or would you want to go and speak to the person that's kind of, you know, has really got something to say, that really has a story to tell, that's got a really distinctive voice and tone, and that's who you'd be drawn to. And I think in an increasingly competitive market, it's so crucial, like it's so fundamental.
Taking a step back as well, though, it raises another important point about tone of voice. When you're saying strip away all the branding and the colours and the pictures, actually, when we did that exercise internally, we did involve our creative team, and I think it's really important when you are creating your tone of voice that you also do get the creators and the designers involved, so that they understand how that's going to carry through, because everything is really closely interwoven.
And that's why it's such an essential piece of work doing this, because it touches everything. And I think with that greater understanding, you could see how it might permeate and influence your visual identity as well, and how you can kind of draw out that tone creatively too. It's really interesting.
I like that answer. Can you imagine though, if someone actually took 3 pieces of unbranded homepage copy from theirs plus 2 competitors, took it to the C-suite and said, right, pick out ours, and they couldn't? That'd be a very awkward, bit illuminating.
Like a taste test.
Which one is ours?
But I think, you know, you look at, you know, if you took it to leadership and you had the brand, like your logo, say, and you were saying, well, we're just going to choose the same brand colours and kind of design. You would never do that. And it's the same with tone. Like, why do you want to sound just the same as your competitors? You should be standing out.
I wonder, though, who would be brave enough, if they've been watching this podcast, to actually do that exercise, to actually have the guts to, like, take that forward and go and talk to their C-suite, or even, like, their team or their marketing team, and just put them on the spot and say, right, which one of these is ours? Because if you can't pick it out, then what are we saying about our own brand? It would be like a really interesting, like very small exercise, just to dip your toe in the water and kind of think, is our brand doing everything we need our brand to do?
Maybe if you spun it more as a taste test, then it might happen more. That sounds fun. I do that.
Less hostile. Give them cakes as well.
Always cakes.
Fab. Well, what I've loved about this conversation is that voice isn't about being louder, it's about being clearer and more human. Emma and James, can I invite you to share just one final thought that you'd like to leave with our listeners and our viewers?
like I've said before, for the bigger corporate companies with brand heritage, it can be really difficult to kind of start to make steps forward into change. But I think it will pay dividends. So yeah, be a little braver.
James?
Yeah, just take it more seriously as well. I think that, be a little bit bolder and realise that there's real commercial gains to be, as a business, to be made from kind of being a bit more distinctive. I think there's power in a stronger tone of voice, and that kind of really infiltrates through to the rest of the brand as well.
Yeah, fab.
Fab, James, Emma, that has been really fascinating, really interesting, some brilliant points. I've learned a lot. Thank you ever so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.